The other day, I bought myself a copy of The Dark Knight Returns. I had read it before, but a couple years ago, and I thought I definitely need to have a copy for myself. And when I was rereading it yesterday, I noticed something very interesting at the end. In the back matter, they had actually published Frank Miller's original pitch for Batman, like the first Batman thing he ever wrote, and it's a very interesting document, and it shares a lot of similarities with some stuff that's in The Dark Knight Returns, and especially stuff in Batman Year One, and I thought that would be a super interesting thing to look at.
Here I have my Dark Knight Returns trade paperback. This is pretty cool, even though it's just a regular trade paperback. It's got a very interesting introduction, and I was impressed by the back matter because I didn't know what this was going to include. It has a cover gallery that's pretty standard, but over here at the back, this is where it gets really interesting. This is the original proposal for The Dark Knight Returns, and over here there's a little quote from Frank Miller that says, "This is the first thing I ever called Dark Knight, a proposal for a relaunch of Batman. It provided me backstory for Dark Knight 1 and much of the substance for Batman Year 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this out and then I'm going to discuss it a bit because this shares lots of connections with his other work. So this is from 1984, quite a while before The Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller hadn't done any work on Batman before this, and this is a proposal for relaunch, as he said. So over here, it's titled Dark Knight, but crossed out over there, it says Holy Terror, which is very interesting because he recycles that name for a later comic, which is very controversial, which is basically about a Batman and Catwoman stand-in, except they basically for the entire comic they kill Muslim terrorists. After 9/11, Frank Miller did get a little crazy, and that I think is the epitome of that. So moving past that, starting here, episode 1, Who I Am, How I Came to Be. A violent thunderstorm batters stately Wayne Manor. Lightning flashes, delineating an otherwise unlit study. We see a bloody hand reach for a huge snifter of brandy and bring it to a pair of bruised and swollen lips. Bruce Wayne, aged 24, his face battered, almost beyond recognition, explains that he is afraid he may have to die tonight. Lightning flash reveals that Bruce is speaking to a marble bust of his father. Bruce speaks fondly of his early childhood. He remembers how many times his father told him his impetuous nature would someday be the death of the young Bruce. So this is interesting because already this is kind of an image from Batman Year One, where he's sitting by the window with the lightning, but this is right before kind of the bat flies in through the window, the iconic moment. It, of course, is very different. There's also a version of something like this in The Dark Knight Returns, but here you can definitely see the bust of his father. Bruce Wayne, age 6, gleefully explores the grounds of Wayne Manor. Faithful family retainer Alfred Pennyworth tries to keep up with the athletic child, but Bruce tears off after a rabbit, leaving Alfred behind. The rabbit ducks into a hole, and Bruce recklessly follows. Almost immediately, the earth gives away under Bruce, and he tumbles headlong into the darkness. His scraped knees and the echo of his fall tell Bruce that he's in a large cave. Then he hears screeching and the flapping of thousands of wings. Bats come at him, then retreat as he swings his arms wildly. He looks about, his vision adjusting to the darkness, and sees one incredibly huge bat hugging the floor, staring back at him, unwilling to retreat as his brothers did. You see a version of this moment in The Dark Knight Returns, but instead of Alfred, he's with his father. And of course, there's this super iconic imagery of the bats. And over here, the sound effects I don't know if this is Frank Miller or the letterer doing this, but this is really cool with the letters. Bruce continues to talk to his father. He's confused by the things he's finding himself thinking about tonight. He wants his father to help him find a way to go on. He has just failed at the only thing that matters to him, so why is he thinking about Zorro, of all things? The black and white image of Douglas Fairbanks Jr. as Zorro flickers across the movie screen. Bruce, age 7, watches, wide-eyed and wondering, as Zorro routs a group of soldiers. Bruce is ecstatic as they leave the theater. His parents laugh and hold hands as Bruce jumps and dances, imitating his new hero. Father mentions that the movie was one of his old favorites. The Waynes are a happy, attractive couple in their late 30s as they walk down the street. We see, huge in the foreground, footsteps following them. Gunman comes up behind the Waynes, threatening, demanding Thomas and Martha hand over their cash. Thomas turns, making a fist. The gunman fires once, and Thomas crumples to the pavement. Bruce steps towards the gunman, his mouth forming a scream. The gunman brings the barrel of his pistol across Bruce's face, stopping the scream and knocking Bruce to the ground. Martha steps forward to protect her child. The gunman grabs her diamond necklace, then fires. The necklace comes free in his hand as Martha is propelled backwards to fall across her husband. Time seems to freeze as Bruce looks at the gunman's face. He sees the deadness in the man's eyes, the same deadness he'd seen in the eyes of a man whose picture he'd seen in the newspaper, a man named Oswald who was supposed to have shot the president. Bruce stares, looking at what seems to be a demon, as the gunman points his pistol at Bruce. Then, Bruce sees a glimmer of guilt in his gunman's eyes, and knows that it is a man who shot his parents. It's a sight he'll never forget. The gunman backs away and flees into the night. Then that is actually shown basically the same as it's described in the proposal, and you can see all the imagery that was described here, and he's basically having a flashback when he watches Zorro as an old man. Then he remembers, you see he's very excited. Then you see over here his father making a fist. This is one of the best sequences in the entire book. And as much as I dislike Zack Snyder's Batman vs Superman movie, the recreation of this scene I really liked. So for the first 5 minutes, I was convinced that movie was going to be the best ever, but I was left severely disappointed. Yeah, I'm not a very big fan of the superhero films of Zack Snyder. Man of Steel just really didn't do it for me. That night, Bruce is barely conscious of a woman's kind attention, and many questions from stern-faced policemen. Then all sense of time is lost. Days and weeks of doctors and therapists float by, all viewed as if from an immense distance by Bruce. Here's himself described as traumatized, catatonic. But Bruce knows that he has simply left the world, and will not return until he finds a reason to. 3 months after his parents' murder, Bruce finds his reason. Alfred sits by his hospital bed, looking worried and awed. Bruce wakes. He calmly, solemnly tells Alfred that he is going to devote his life to warring on all criminals. He asks Alfred if he will help. Alfred quietly agrees. 6 months later, Bruce calls his family attorney into his father's office. Bruce sits cross-legged in his father's huge chair, holding a large open book in his lap. He explains that he wishes to enlist the attorney's services, using his allowance to keep orphanages, schools, and scholastic institutions out of Bruce's life. Alfred will function as Bruce's guardian until Bruce is 21. The attorney tells Bruce that all this is impossible. Bruce says no, it isn't. In fact, he's just figured out how to do it. He starts reading from the book in his lap. Briefly, we see Bruce studying with tutors, who seem amazed at his aptitude and intensity. Alfred watches, a little worried, a little confused, and very proud. Bruce comments to Alfred at one point that nothing in his studies contradicts the lessons he learned when he was 7 years old, that the world only makes sense when you force it to. This whole piece of text I just read is an extremely interesting part of this, because this hasn't been explored in any of Frank Miller's Batman comics. And I think this is a really fascinating bit. And you can see there are lots of great character moments, especially the relationship with Alfred. And I know other writers have touched on this, but this part of Batman's origin is quite overlooked in my opinion. And I think this is a very concise way to describe it. Bruce, age 12, lies in bed as Alfred reads him the concluding lines of the Purloined Letter. Alfred smiles, sets the book down, and talks about the importance of the story in the development of detective fiction. Bruce, jaw set, eyes open, asks quietly if the killer was caught and punished. Alfred assures him that he was. Bruce closes his eyes and sleeps peacefully. This bit is brought up in The Dark Knight Returns, and I'm actually surprised about how much The Dark Knight Returns has defined Batman's origin before Batman Year One, because there weren't really so many Batman origins before Batman Year One. So it's very interesting that basically the last Batman story would create the definitive origin. So I think that is a very interesting aspect of The Dark Knight Returns. Bruce, age 19, stands on a mountaintop in South America. He and a dozen other men and women wear white karate robes. Bruce is attacked by a hulk of a man. He easily smashes the man to the ground, whirls and brings his foot to the man's neck. His next blow would easily kill the man. Bruce steps back and smiles. He turns to his teacher, a fierce-looking black man named Jagger. Jagger strikes him roughly in the face, tells Bruce that he is still too violent, too angry in his approach. Bruce argues, saying that Jagger knows that Bruce is the finest student of Jagger's eclectic fighting style. Jagger tells Bruce that his feelings are interfering with his concentration, that rage ultimately robs him of his real power. Bruce says that's rhetoric, embarrassing Jagger in front of the class. Jagger decides to make an example of Bruce and kicks him twice, viciously, knocking him to the ground. Bruce looks up, grins, and says he'll show Jagger what his rage can do. Bruce seems to fly from the ground, striking Jagger's chest and stomach with powerful kicks, then using a kung fu punch to smash Jagger's nose. Jagger collapses, nearly unconscious. He watches Bruce leave, his face twisted with hate. This bit is, it's only in this pitch. I haven't seen... Jagger isn't a character that exists in Batman's mythology. I believe this is kind of inspired by the stuff with Ra's al Ghul that Neil Adams introduced. I'm not so familiar with that, but what I know this is similar to is Batman Begins. I'm not the biggest fan of that movie, but I think the idea of Batman's teacher becoming villain in the future is pretty cool. And this last bit, his face twisted with hate, kind of sets that up. And I think that's a very interesting adversary for Batman to have, like a fighting equal or superior who could maybe even pick up that Batman is Bruce Wayne because he recognizes the strange martial art Batman uses. And I think that's a really clever idea. Bruce Wayne, age 24, returns to Gotham City. He walks calmly down the narrow street where his parents were murdered and stops to lean casually against the streetlight that shines down on the stretch of the pavement where his parents lay 17 years earlier. He can almost see them, and the face of the little boy whose world was smashed to bits, and another face of a man who was not a demon. From behind Bruce, we see 3, then 6 pairs of feet approach. They circle him quickly, merrily. One asks him what an uptown boy is doing in such a lousy neighborhood at such a late hour. Bruce almost distractedly says he was born here. One of them draws a 9mm pistol and tells him to hand over his wallet. Bruce says no, I don't think so. Then he leaps above the gun, lashing out with a flying kick that sends the hood sprawling. Bruce drops to the ground, snatching up the dropped pistol and aims at the next nearest hood. The pistol jams. Then they are on him, kicking, stabbing, beating him horribly. Bruce fights back, though outnumbered, wounding several of them, but they win the fight, taking his wallet and leaving him a bloody, broken mess on the sidewalk. After a long pause, he somehow begins an agonizing journey back to Wayne Manor. Bruce sits, pleading with his father. He has learned tonight that is not enough to know how to fight, no matter how well. His mission is that of one against thousands. He needs something that will give him an edge. He pleads with his father, show me the way. There's a deafening crack of thunder. A high casing window shatters inward. For a moment everything is silent. Then he hears the flapping of wings. The huge bat from the cave he'd seen when he was 6 years old glides into the study. Hideous, frightening, and powerful. It lands on his father's bust, its wings draped on either side of his father's head. It stares at Bruce. Bruce looks deeply into the eyes of the demon and smiles. Thank you, father, he says. This, of course, is the most iconic moment to come out of Batman Year One. It's also explored in The Dark Knight Returns, and there are other moments where this kind of scene is recreated in other defining moments. And I think this is really, really good. This whole mugging scenario, I think it's pretty good, but I think Batman Year One definitely does it a bit more elegantly, since this is quite, maybe a bit on the nose, but it's still pretty cool. And so that's it for this proposal. I think Frank Miller, at times his writing can be a bit hit or miss, but some of his best work, like some of his Daredevil comics and his work on The Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, are just on another level. And this script, it's amazing. The writing is evocative. It conjures up this image, and you can see how intentional every detail is. And when I was reading a bit of the script of Daredevil the Man Without Fear, that was included in the back of the trade paperback, that also kind of had this effect. But this is especially interesting because it's got his basically the canon origin of Batman in Frank Miller's head, so you can keep this in mind when reading his Batman comics. So that's it for the proposal. Some other interesting stuff here in the back of this book are some like unused pages, like here, and then some black and white pages. Apparently Harlan Ellison got the original art of this. Harlan Ellison actually appears in The Dark Knight Returns, and he has a very funny little line of dialogue. You can see how it was changed in the inking stage. I think I'm glad that Klaus Janson kept it pretty true to the pencils, because I think his inks can be pretty hit or miss, because sometimes his personal style shines through, but I feel he did a really good job in The Dark Knight Returns. Towards the end of the book, I know that Frank Miller was definitely doing a lot more of his own inking. Personally, I prefer his inking style, but still, this is an amazing comic. If you haven't read it, obviously you have to. It's so good. Best Batman comic. And you must also read Batman Year One. You should probably start with this, even though it was published after, because this should be your first Batman comic. This should probably be your last, because it's as good as it's going to get, I think. So that's it for my video. I hope you found this proposal to be interesting. Hope my reading wasn't too bad. Thank you for watching.